This happened during my final year of high school, when I was still living with my parents in Shimokitazawa, a district of Tokyo. One particularly dark and stormy night in Shimokitazawa, while I was laying in bed, probably in a state somewhere between half awake and half asleep, I started feeling strange. My head was turned to the right side, facing away from the door. Suddenly, an inexplicable feeling of unease pulled me from my slumber. Unlike the gradual awakening of a typical morning, my eyes snapped open, fully alert. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I realized that the morning was still far away. It was still night time. After blinking a couple of times, in my dazed and confused state, I suddenly saw what I could only describe as an apparition hovering at the foot of my bed. It was not a vague shadow or a trick of the light, but a distinct figure, translucent yet unmistakable. It was a young man, similar to the boy from the Grudge movie, you know, with gaunt features and eyes devoid of emotion. Perhaps this is what terrified me the most. I had no idea what he was going to do next. Is he sad, happy or angry, or in between? It was the fear of the unknown that terrified me the most. He looked directly at me with his meaningless gaze. Frozen in terror, I could only stare back. The room seemed to grow colder, and the air felt heavy with a suffocating presence. The figure began to move, gliding silently around the bed, coming closer with each passing second. My heart pounded in my chest, the fear almost paralyzing me. I wanted to scream, to call out for help, but my voice seemed trapped within me. The apparition reached the side of my bed, leaning in closer until his face was mere inches from me. I could see every detail, the hollow cheeks, the dark circles under his eyes, the slight shimmer of his ghostly form. His breath, cold and stale, brushed against my skin as he whispered, voice full of emotion, but his face remaining expressionless. "Help me." The words sent a shiver down my spine. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what was happening. Was this real? A nightmare? My instincts took over, and I turned away, pulling the blanket over my head like a child seeking protection from the monster in the closet. I lay there shaking, listening to the silence that followed. Suddenly, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I flinched, unable to move, my body locked in place. The touch was icy, seeping through the fabric of my pajamas, and I could feel the pressure increasing, as if the apparition was trying to pull me back. Then I heard a faint, rhythmic tapping. It started softly, but grew louder, echoing through the room. I realized that whatever it was, it is no longer touching my shoulder, but instead, the thing is making noise somewhere further away in my room. Summoning every ounce of my remaining courage, I peeked out from under the blanket. The apparition was now by the window, tapping its fingers against the glass in a slow, deliberate manner. It turned to look at me, his eyes remaining expressionless. "Help me," he said with a shuddering voice. My alarm clock caught my eye. It was 1:03 a.m. I had to do something. Summoning the remnants of my bravery, I decided to confront whatever was happening. I sat up, suddenly shaking but very determined, and asked, "What? What do you want?" The apparition looked at me for a moment. Then it simply opened its mouth to speak, and asked, "Have I died?" I blinked in confusion, and the next moment I knew, suddenly, the apparition vanished, leaving me alone in my cold, dark room. I was breathless, my heart pounding. I glanced at the clock again. It was 1:05 a.m. Only 2 minutes have passed, yet it felt like an eternity. Kya! I started screaming. Naturally, my mom came to my room, terrified of my screams. She comforted and reassured me that everything was all right. According to her, I had experienced something along the lines of vivid nightmare and/or sleep paralysis. Once I calmed down, my mom left my room and returned to her own bedroom to continue sleeping. I, however, felt too restless to just fall back asleep after what just happened. Thus, I turned on the light, flooding my room with a warm, reassuring orange glow. The cold sensation that lingered in my room quickly dissipated with the orange warm light, but my fear still lingered. I needed some more reassurance if I was to go back to sleep tonight without freaking myself out again. So I went out to get my family dog, Max. As soon as he entered my room, he began to growl, his face fixed on the corner of the ceiling. My blood ran cold. It was as if the presence was still there, watching and waiting. And my dog, Max, could sense it. It's as if my dog was trying to protect me or chase away whatever still lingered inside my room. I immediately felt so secure and protected. #feeling blessed. Like, oh my god. Desperate for some kind of closure, I approached the corner. My voice now seems much more stern and deliberate as I shout, "Why don't you just let me be? Seriously, like, oh my god. I don't know anything about you or how to help you, nor do I really care. Go and annoy someone somewhere else. Shoo!" For a moment there, I thought I saw a reflection of this so-called apparition in my nearby mirror, looking at me with a Pepe expression, a single tear rolling down his cheek, and then, just as sudden, it disappeared. This both freaked me out and confused me at the same time. Then the coldness lifted, and my dog Max stopped growling. I stayed up for the rest of the night, unable to sleep. The apparition's image and his Pepe face expression still etched into my mind. The next day, I learned something that gave me a pause. My mother told me about a previous family who lived there before we moved over. The mother in that family had a son who was very much into researching internet memes during his free time, but the son unfortunately died at a relatively early age. Apparently, the young man decided to end his journey prematurely sometime before finishing high school. Mom didn't have the opportunity to pry more, as the previous owners of our place were not the most conversation type. Not to mention, the previous owners of our house mentioned this only briefly and only after the money was paid, before immediately leaving the premises. We do not know exactly where the previous owners of our place had moved, so unfortunately it is impossible for us to contact and ask them for more information. Could it be that the ghost had visited me seeking some help or closure, or was it all just for the lulz? Considering that this young man at the time was very much into researching internet memes at the time, was I literally trolled by an undead ghost just for them keks? So the ghost literally checked and kecked from me, sleeping in what previously was his own room? I'll never know for sure, but the experience left an indelible mark on me. Years have passed, and I still sleep in the same room, and I'm still living with my parents in Shimokitazawa. Nothing like that has ever happened again, but every now and then I do feel a cold breeze or hear a faint tapping at the window. It's a reminder of that night, and of this strange apparition that visited me. Behold, our hero of this story, or as some would call her, antagonist, but she's definitely the protagonist. We will call her Miss L. Miss L is a middle-aged working woman, living from paycheck to paycheck, as many folks do nowadays. Except Miss L is different than most of us, good and honest folks, because she's a convicted felon. Or is she? Because even though she was arrested for murder, the courtroom really took their time to actually trial and convict her proper. So long, in fact, that by the time the courtroom handed her sentence, so much time had passed that it became redundant, and now Miss L is a free woman. How did such nonsense come to pass, you may ask? Well, let's find out. According to the February 12, 2024 decision of the Panevėžys Prison Parole Commission, Miss L was released on parole with intensive supervision. However, just when she thought she was done with the legal system, the Supreme Court of Lithuania decided to give her one last twist. They concluded that maybe, just maybe, Miss L didn't cold-bloodedly murdered her partner. Go figure. So what really went down? Picture this. It is a cold and snowy February 11, 2020. Miss L, our protagonist, is heading home from work with a bottle of wine in her hands. Yes, she's an alcoholic. Miss L prides herself for only drinking on her days off and going to work sober. That is, unless some residue is still left on Monday morning from the weekend binge. She finds her young boyfriend, we'll call him Dimitri, in his usual state, drunk and doing absolutely nothing productive. Well, not entirely nothing. He was doing a sterling job at breathing oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide, and occasionally expelling some methane as well. The house was cold, the stove unlit, and Demetrius was guzzling beer, like a car with an empty tank guzzling fuel while being refueled at the petrol station. Naturally, a heated argument ensues between two lovers. Miss L, frustrated with her partner's lack of care, takes a swig from her wine bottle to calm her nerves. While preparing dinner and handling a kitchen knife, Dimitri starts his usual tirade, coming to the kitchen and starting to shout at his dear Miss L. Except he wasn't proclaiming his eternal love, rather telling her to go F herself, that Miss L is a wench, and she's good for nothing, this and that, and above all else, she should make him a sandwich. Miss L didn't took it too kindly, and she was not amused, and also returned the favor by uttering some choice words herself, probably telling him kindly to do her a favor and go jump off a cliff or something, or drink in the middle of the Autobahn. At any rate, I can assure you that nothing worth writing down, and most especially nothing of English, was uttered during that cold winter evening. At some point, the guy takes off his shirt and, showing off his beer belly in all its greasy glory, shouts to his wife, "Kill me!" "You're being stupid again. To hell with you," Miss L answered. "I'm not going to sit in jail because of you, you dim-witted bastard." Miss L responded with something along the lines, "Now shalom, the exit from my house is there," she pointed a finger at it, "and don't let the door hit you on the way out." Some more choice words were exchanged, and the guy eventually slapped Miss L on her cheek.
Ow! Ow! Ow!
"I believe I told you to make me a sandwich, you worthless wench. Didn't I?" Dimitri shouted. Naturally, the slap on the cheek hurt, and in return, Miss L punched Dimitri in the chest. That wouldn't be so bad, except for the fact that she had a knife in her right hand, with which she was chopping some vegetables. Dimitri falls to the ground. Miss L nods in approval and decides that, you know what? She's no longer hungry. She steps around her husband lying on the floor and goes to bed. He'll turn up. According to Miss L, the guy was still breathing while she left him on the kitchen floor that evening. Disregarding the knife in his chest, and having him bleeding all over the place and most likely choking on his own blood at that very moment. But as I often like to say, details. The next morning, Miss L casually boils some coffee in the same kitchen, makes herself a sandwich, and then goes to work, casually ignoring her now deceased boyfriend, who is still lying on the kitchen floor. That evening, she stops by a neighbor lady's place for a chat, still not mentioning her deceased boyfriend. After a lengthy gossiping session and sipping some coffee at the neighbor lady's place, Miss L finally returns to her abode. I can understand why she wasn't too eager to return. The corpse was still in the very same position, still lying on the kitchen floor. Miss L even commented about how she noticed her husband didn't move. She must also have noticed that the entire kitchen floor have been covered in blood, or at least good part of it, not to mention the smell. But she either didn't fully comprehend that her lover is dead, or she didn't care. Either way, she went to sleep, wake up next day, repeat. This routine continues until February 14th, for around 3 days, when Miss L, with a blood alcohol level of 2.83, finally decides to call an emergency services to report the 3-day-old stabbing. That is, not before she once again woke up in the morning, drank coffee in the same kitchen with the corpse, went to work, and then returned with a bunch of alcohol and had a full-on drinking binge. Only after being piss-drunk long into the night did she finally call the cops. While the police, as always, takes their sweet time to arrive, Miss L even sends a sweet goodbye text message to her lover's mother. Quote, Love, kisses, hugs, don't think badly of me, unquote. Whatever that means. Anyway, moving on. During the investigation and the court proceedings, neighbors unanimously spoke ill of Demetrius, painting him as a drunkard, a degenerate, and a local pervert, and a brawler who enjoyed running naked through the neighborhood. They described Miss L as the hard-working, sober one holding the entire house together. Even Demetrius's own mother initially admitted that her son was a violent alcoholic, only to later change her tune to undermine Miss L during the trial proceedings. All the trial proceedings really took their sweet time to finish. In the end, Miss L was handed a sentence, 2 years. But by the time the final sentence was handed down, she had already spent 4 years behind bars. Thus, considering the time discrepancy, the lagging procedures of the law, and considering the fact that the Supreme Court decided that maybe the murder wasn't so bad after all, and Miss L acted under duress in the heat of moment, and this was basically self-defense. Thus, henceforth she was declared an innocent woman, and now she walks free. The only downside is that she must be on her best behavior for a couple of years in probation, and to pay 9,000 euro for Dimitri's mother, who is now living in Belarus, I hear. Most likely that means Miss L will not be paying money for her lover's mother because the state of Belarus is the enemy, the same as Russia. It's a package deal. Both countries are cancelled, last I heard, since the whole Ukraine thing. Thus, EU banks are prohibited by law to have any dealings with these countries, and Lithuania is a proud member of the European Union. In conclusion, both participants of the crime were drunk and enraged for stabbing her lover in the chest with a knife and murdering him. Miss L got, what, a measly 2 years in Lithuania, but had to spend around 4 years behind bars waiting for all the appeals to be handed down the final sentence. Still, that's low even by our standards, because usually what would count as a capital first-degree murder in the USA, for which you get the needle, in Lithuania this gets you around 8 to 15 years, and this is for proper slasher movie flick, not your average stab one and done, which is what happened in this case. Usually for good behavior you serve only half a sentence. Not to mention prisoners literally escape from prison every 3 days according to the news, only to be later recaptured and returned to repeat the same process next week. But we don't sweat the small stuff here. That's why I love this country. But it's a love-hate relationship. And that brings us to the end of today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. There's more from where that came from. This world is full of messed up stories and weird crime cases. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and comment if you do. Thank you.